Thanks, Justin. Look, thanks for joining us. I think you've undersold yourself a lot there, particularly the fact that you've served this country in the military and then gone on to do so much humanitarian and other exciting things. It'd be great to understand, initially perhaps, why you chose the military as your initial path. Was that something that was like, were you born into it? Was it something that you fell
No,
into, and how has that shaped your life going forward?
it's a very good question, and it's very relevant with me actually. I wasn't born, well, when I say I wasn't born into it, my folks, I'm 60, so my folks were all kind of on the brink of national service, so they all sort of had a link in. And my pa was in the special forces, and so he sort of he was a very good swimmer and athlete, sort of almost at national level. And um, so I was very lucky. I grew up in the Mediterranean. I'm the youngest of four kids, so I've always been trying to sort of catch up, really, with my brothers and my sister. And um, Malta, I was brought up in Malta, and it was very fabulous. We were sailors. My folks had a boat, and so I could almost sail before I could walk. And so sailing is a very good kind of backdrop for learning a whole mass of things around Mother Nature, really, understanding weather. And you have to be quite resourceful on boats because, if you're out sailing and something breaks, well, you have to fix it, really. So that was sort of very early on, sort of sunk into my DNA. And when I was at school, I was a very keen sportsman, and I sort of didn't really know what I wanted to do. My dad worked in the city basically, and he had his own business for one of his kids to do that, and none of my siblings did. So there was a bit of pressure on me trying to look at that. And one day, an amazing guy called Arthur Denaro, who also was in the special forces, he led the Iranian embassy siege way back when. Came and talked at my school, and I hadn't really thought about the military, and he was so good at sort of being expansive around what you can do. Really, you sort of carry on with sort of developing yourself, and you don't get sucked into a sort of a stream
Mm.
which demands something else. And so I kind of just yeah sorted it out. Basically, went to Sandhurst, and I joined for 3 years, and I did 10, and I loved it. It worked for me. And as with all these things, expeditions they're kind of military affairs, really. You need to be very detailed, and it starts with your preparation and then the whole sort of execution of what you do. And it was a fantastic set of skill sets that I learned quite early, actually, which I've carried forward to this day. I still use it, but I also, running parallel with that, I always hark back to sailing. I mean, I sailed for Britain. I did a race called the Whitbread around the world, which was a round the world race when I was quite young. And again, boats are brilliant because you're all thrown together. You all work quite hard. There's nowhere to go and hide if you're pissed off with someone, or you have to sort of gel. And it was very good on understanding teamworks and people and getting the best out of people and stuff. So I was lucky, I think. I mean, three things. I mean, being the youngest was great because I was always kind of quite keen to catch up, as I said, and then the sailing and the military, all very, very brilliant tools for me in sort of my foundation, in looking at my foundation.
And do you think, I mean, obviously you've mentioned it already, but how important do you think was the skills that you learned in the military for setting you up for your current and future success?
Um, I do masses of talks to businesses and things, and I think what it taught me. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you all know this. You have your own business, and everything comes down to you at the end of the day. And you can, as you're growing up, you can think about, cutting corners and, slightly taking an easier path. And then you realize at some stage, hopefully early, that actually what you need to do is you need to tuck in. You need to sit up,
Mm,
and you need to learn. You need to listen to people. You need to observe what is going to make you be the best version of yourself. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's business or whether it's you at your home and with your relationships, or if you're going to step into the sort of world that I gravitated towards, which was sort of adventure and extreme adventure. And Basically, yes, you have to. It's up to you what you take forward and say that was great. And sometimes it's the negative. You'll see something, you go, that just doesn't work. That won't work for me. And I'm a really big believer in stepping into the unknown, really, even if it scares you or you don't really know much about it. And you'll always learn. You'll learn
mm,
pretty if you're receptive. So I love that. And again, on my adventuring sort of journey, it started, as with all of us, really. I mean, only 100 years ago, Daniel, no one had been, just over 100 years, no one had been to the North Pole. No one had been to the
mm,
South Pole. Peary went to the North Pole in 1909. Amundsen had his great, dust up with Scott in 1911, and he got to the, this amazing beacon at the bottom of the world, hugely tough trip.
mm.
And when Scott got there, Amundsen had got there 34 days earlier. Nothing, And interestingly, on that trip, he had a guy called Lawrence Oates with him, a captain, who was in my regiment, where I was in his old regiment.
Really?
And he was the guy who very infamously, I mean, they all died, sadly, all Scott's team died, but he was holding them up. He had terrible frostbite in his feet. And in a storm one night, they were all in their tent, sort of miserable as hell, knowing that they were, it was a tough call for them to get to back to base where their boat was. And he left the tent and said, "I'm just going outside, and I might be some time." And he basically just walked to his death to
Oh
to
my
help
God.
the others. So yeah, the North Pole, the South Pole. I mean, Everest wasn't conquered until 29th of May 1953, which is obviously the Queen's Jubilee, or coronation, sorry, with Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. Robin Knox Johnson, first guy to sail around the world. That wasn't until 1967. And that took him in a small boat called Sahili, 32-foot boat, took him 312 days. Now the record for the fastest circumnavigation is 40 days.
Oh my God.
And it's insane. And then obviously the moon, that wasn't conquered until 1969. So all of these sort of, they really captivated me, those stories. And I still kind of can't believe it. I marvel at how bizarre it is that I've replicated a lot of those. Obviously, not gone to the moon, which I'd like to do, but it's very odd. You can do, if you put your mind to anything, you can pretty much do anything. I mean, I'm not really very good at anything, but I've just really stuck at stuff, and so I've become pretty good at stuff now. And I think it's a really good thing for people to learn. You and I were talking off air before about, um, people who have some kind of injury, and some of them very serious, certainly in the military, and then they go and do amazing things,
Mm.
inspirational things, which we sort of able-bodied people will sit at home and say, "Oh, I wish I could go," and they go and do it, and it's such a good kick up the arse for us. And I, have been very privileged to have taken quite a lot of youngsters off to the North Pole and South Pole, and various other things. We replicated Shackleton's trip, and they're just done nothing but amazing, really. And it really
Mm.
it highlights how brilliant the human is, and if you've just got that drive and the passion, pretty much everything is possible, really.
And obviously, you've been awarded an MBE. What was that like? I mean, was that something that kind of came out of the blue? Was it something that,
Yeah, 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 totally.
what led to that? I guess it's a
Uh,
momentous life occasion.
Yeah, it was huge actually. And look, you don't. Well, hopefully you don't do these things for recognition. You do them because they fuel your soul, really.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a huge honor, and it was basically for charity work I've done with youth groups and stuff, and expeditioning, and um, yeah, I mean, how lucky, to have been picked up for it,
So,
and
so do you feel that giving back is as important for you as doing it for yourself? I mean, is that what drives you now that you've done so many things like,
yeah,
under your own steam, as it were?
yeah, again, good question. I mean, look, I think I've definitely changed. When I was younger, you're kind of driven around your own selfish kind of wants, really.
Mm,
And uh, you have to have a certain amount of confidence in what you think you can achieve. But I love that. I mean, I think youth is such a cool thing because you sort of, you're prepared to sort of bust through things and make stuff happen.
mm,
Um, as I've got older, I have definitely changed, and I really love the fact of doing stuff where you see other people flourish as I get a bit
mm,
older. But to be fair, I mean, all my trips, I've always tried to do something to raise money or to bring people along who might not have had the ability to have that kind of an opportunity. And you're so right, because it's such a rewarding thing to do. It's again, what controls quality of your life. It's
mm,
never what you think it is. I mean, you might think it's something to do with uh, being rich, having money. But the reality is, you can be rich and unhappy, as are many people, or it can be about relationships, and you can be in one, but you can be unhappy.
mm.
And the truth is, quality of life is really determined by what your meaning is and what your emotion is. And I think the sooner you work that out, it's fantastic. It's a really giving back is probably the most rewarding thing you can do, however small. People do
Mm.
remarkably cool things. In deprived areas, people will start boxing gyms. They'll do, and my goodness, they will walk 10 feet tall, and we must really encourage it. I think where we are, the world, we're in a funny place at the moment, and I think, yeah, we must really get people hopefully doing more of that kind of stuff. It's a very wholesome and satisfying, rewarding thing to get involved in for all parties, really.
Do you think, just kind of going off subject a little bit, obviously there was talk in the UK about reintroducing national service, which may or may not happen. Obviously, that's kind of outside the realm of certainly my influence and probably yours as well. But do you think if that were to happen, based on your experience in the military, that would be a positive, or do you think that where we are in society now, that maybe it's not the right thing?
I look. I think the wording of all these things has to be very carefully thought of. National service sums up people going into the military, and that won't work. There's masses of people who just, that's not for them.
Mm,
However, I mean, if you look at schemes like, the Duke of Edinburgh's award, Operation Rally, where kids go off and do things. Yeah, my children have done DAV. My daughter's just finished her goal, and they're always super apprehensive. And because it's not on curriculum,
mm,
it's a pain. It's a pain, actually. They have to do it outside of everything else. However, absolutely categorically, when they do their expeditioning, which is quite hardcore, I mean, they'll go and do, like, 70 miles in 4 days, and they're carrying all their clobber and stuff.
mm,
Inevitably, God bless the UK, it honks with rain. They have a proper adventure, and they come back with feet full of blisters and masses of war stories, but they are taller. They
mm,
love it, And it's a funny thing, hardship, resilient grit, all of that stuff. We have to learn that nonsense. It's a really important thing. And unless you present it to people, unless you put it in front of them and they
mm,
go, okay, I'm going to experience this. you don't really know what's in your tank. And the truth
No.
is, I've been very lucky, and I'm sure you with lots of your clients, you must have seen this. I know when I think my tank is empty, there is more. And
Mm,
I've pushed that for 45 years. And only by actually stress testing yourself do you learn these things. So I actually think some kind of a system where we take people and we give them the opportunity to test themselves, to understand the importance of teams and working with people, all of it in a funny way to give them more confidence.
mm,
I think it would be an amazingly good thing to do, but it's how it's presented, because if you
yeah.
present it the wrong way, everyone's just going to go, no way, that's not. And so I think that's the skill.
Yeah.
And so if there was a way to do that and do it really cleverly, I would be absolutely all over it. I really would.
Yeah.
I think it'd be brilliant.
So obviously on to adventures. Obviously, how I came into contact with you was with the NASA sponsored trip that you did, 4,200 kilometers, if my memory serves me right, and unsupported. I think that's really important. It was just you, one other, couple of sleds, and some legs, and a bit of grit, as you say. How did that come about, and what was obviously, I guess that makes you an analog astronaut, I guess is the term that people use now.
Mm.
And I guess the purpose of it was to kind of road test humans for the extremes of space. But how did that all come about, and what did you learn about yourself, and what do you think NASA and the others?
Well, so it came about through me, really. I mean, I've been to the North Pole 4 times. I've been to the South Pole. I've been 3 times, but I've been to the coast as well. And I've always thought about doing a crossing. And you've got to. Antarctica is vast, Daniel. You sort of people don't realize. I mean, it's 1.5 times the size of North America, and that's before winter sea ice. And also, it's a very important area with regard to the world's ecosystem. On top of the landmass, it's a huge ice cube, which is 5 k's deep from the top. And that ice cube represents 90% of the world's fresh water. And so keeping that in order is very important, because the current sea levels are going up, as we know. I mean, I read the other day that there's a volume of Everest every year being lost off the Antarctic sea ice every year. And so it's very important to understand what's going on there. And there are stations, but they're all dotted around the coast, basically. No one goes into the middle. If people do crossings, what they do is they go up the peninsula. So they go from the Weddell Sea and they cut up to the South Pole. So the South Pole isn't in the middle of the landmass, it's over to one side, below sort of South America. And then they do a dogleg over to the Ross Sea. And I was sort of intrigued about going into the actual center of it. And the actual center is a place called the Pole of Inaccessibility. And so the original idea was that we go to the Pole of Inaccessibility, then to the South Pole. And it wasn't, it was actually about 2,700 kilometers. And so I was sort of thinking about this, and I wanted to move away from raising money, which is what I tended to do on trips. So philanthropy is a funny thing. You can't really make I feel personally, if you're doing something and you're raising money, then you must be discreet about it. And so I wanted to sort of make some noise around what I've seen. I first went to the high Arctic, to the North Pole, about 30 something years ago. And now it's almost impossible, Daniel, to go. I mean, the sea ice is getting so thin. So most of the time you'll be in an immersion suit swimming. And I last went there, I don't know, 4 years ago, and that was the case. And so I just thought, that's very frightening. 40 years is nothing. And there's a bit of hopefully there's relevance around someone like my story, who's actually seen it. So I wanted to switch to research, basically, and I thought, who are the best people to collaborate with. And I got into NASA, which is an incredible organization, the same with the European Space Agency. And all the research was controlled and governed through Stanford University in America, which is incredible as well. And for a year and a bit, Jamie and I, my comrade in arms, Jamie Facer-Giles, were the most highly tested two people on the planet. So we basically gave blood, pee, poo, and saliva every day for about 16 months. And then we had smart technology up the yin yang on us. So they really could analyze us. And the thinking around the psychological and the physical research we were doing is really about the next frontier of exploration, which is space. We're in it. People are going into space as we speak. And it's not professionals. Normally astronauts were fighter experts who'd been at the very highest level of that kind of training. Now, if you can pay your money, you can go, and very soon that will be happening, going to Mars. And there's lots of sort of complications around that. If you go to Mars, you're going to be sat in a small tin can for 3 months. And what does that look like? What is that going to do to you psychologically? What's it going to do to you physically? And there are very few places you can test that. And oddly, Antarctica is perfect, because when you're on the plateau of Antarctica, it is an absolute pristine environment, i.e. there isn't a living entity, no bacteria, no virus. It is perfect. So as Petri dishes go, it's a wonderful place to go and stretch people. And the other thing which people don't really realize about that kind of travel is that everything is white. So you and I here in London, as you move around today, there's masses of content for your mind to pick up on. So you might be driving and you'll see a lovely rose bush, and it'll send you on a glide path of thought somewhere. Or you could, so there's lots of triggers to. Now imagine I took all of that away from you. It's like I put you just in a padded white cell and I left you there. I mean, our trip took 60-something days, 62 days. And I just left you there. And then I made you work super, super hard against the odds. So you were running through the boredom aspect of having to do 8-9 hours of hard graft every day. And then you obviously your body starts deflating, so then you're on pain as well. But there's no triggers.
No complete sensory deprivation. Yeah.
To stimulate you. And your mind, it can really play havoc with you. It needs stuff. So you train it to sort of, take you, when you're really kind of struggling, there'll be a thought process which you will go down to hopefully lose an hour, or kind of, slightly blur or dull the issues that are at bay at that time. So again, it's a really it's a fantastically interesting area to test people. So when it all came together, it came together so brilliantly, and you very kindly got involved, and we had a huge thing around what we ate, how we ate stuff. We were burning about 8,000 calories a day, if not more. We had to carry everything. So our pulks, our sledges, were about 220 kilos when we started, because you had to carry all your fuel, everything. And so we really needed, masses of science went into what we ate, and we got all, the amazing people from NASA, amazing people from the European Space Agency, and masses of others. So the whole project was phenomenal. I mean, it was a really phenomenally cool undertaking, and fascinating to be in the middle of it, really. And yeah, it was one hell of an adventure.
I mean, do you think that will ever? Do you think there's been like a lasting impact on you from that, in terms of the mental side of it, in terms of having this lack of stimulation for such a long period of time, and how important was it to have a partner there? I mean, do you think you could have done it alone, or do you think it's a task too great for a single person?
No, you could definitely, I think the right person, and it's been done. Borg Olsen has done it, and another Norwegian called Rune Geldnes, two extraordinary individuals. I think, I mean, there's two parts to that question. Anyone who does anything solo, I think, is amazing, and I've thought about it myself from a sailing context, because to be master of everything is a hell of a skill set. But the truth is, I like people, and also I think you have to realize why you're doing these things. If you and I are somewhere amazing, like when I was climbing Everest, there are times when you see things and they're just phenomenal. It's the top of Everest. We when we were doing our push to the summit, we climbed from early evening and got to the summit at midnight. At 7 a.m. So we climbed all night, and it was a beautiful night, and I was looking at stars, and they were below me. I mean, phenomenal. It was, phenomenal, and but masses of things. I've seen, and it's so nice to be like, Daniel. Oh my God, look at and you share that. But we're all different. I mean, look, again, I've done this for a long time, and when you understand. None of these things are fun. When I say they're not fun, they're amazing fun. In hindsight, they're phenomenal.
Yeah.
On the Chasing the Light expedition, our high risk assessment was if something went wrong, and the chances are something was going to go wrong, with one of us being hurt, was that it would take between 2 weeks and 3 weeks for someone to get to us, if they could get to us. And the reason for that is, you're asking someone to do something quite dangerous, which is fly a plane. They have to drop fuel dumps, go back, and they basically wind their way to where you are, and then hopefully can land somewhere. And as I said, I've been to Antarctica a few times, and you have this. There tends to be a prevailing wind there, so you have this. It's called sastrugi, which is, imagine you're in a bay and it's quite windy, and you've got waves with white horses starting to form. They can be anything from about 2 feet to about 3 or 4 feet. And then you just freeze that. You just literally freeze it. And that's kind of the terrain you go over. And we were kiting, so we had kites. And so you clatter along quite fast. And because we had so much weight, we always had to have a kite which was too big for us. So if you were just doing it, and they're unruly beasts. And they're fine when you're controlling them, but if you for some reason don't, because your pulk is pulling you one way and suddenly something, it can create a problem. And we had every day I'd seen Jamie bounce around and go, oh my God, he's definitely going to hurt himself. So we had that every day. So you sort of knew that, understanding, from my perspective, that there was someone else with you is very reassuring. From the aspect of the second part of your question on stress, I mean, stress is a part of all of our lives. And again, coming back to when we started our chat about understanding how you will cope when things don't go according to plan. The military is phenomenal at that. I've been to war. I was in the first Gulf War, and nothing ever goes to plan. But the training is so damn good that when lead is flying around, you become very clear around what you need to do and what you need to relay to your soldiers or the people around you. So everyone is clear. And the more you step into an environment where you have those kind of triggers, which are actually very, very, for most of us, are very frightening, you become very clear of mind about how you deal with it. And so Jamie's in his 30s, so he's a lot younger than me, but he's in the military as well. It used to make me laugh because we were doing psychological testing every day, and it was through a fantastic guy called Ben in the Central Florida University. And basically we had a phone, and we'd look into we had our iPhones, and the camera was looking at our iris, and we had to go through a set of questions.
Yeah.
And they were like sort of teasers, really, about, conundrums that you had to sort of work through. And then at the end of that, you give like a 3-minute spiel about how your day was. And I would listen to Jamie. So we're in our tent, tiny tent. Everything is tiny because there's always so much wind. So you can't stand up in it. You can just sort of, you kneel in it kind of. And he'd be like, we'd had a, hellish day. I mean, the coldest temperature we skied through was -62. So if you think your freezer is -14, I mean, if you put a sword up, you'd sort of just get blocks of ice. And we kite in lots of wind. We realised that we just had to cut. We lost a lot of days early on where we were burning fuel and food that we needed for the trip, not for sitting around because there was too much wind. I mean, we had over 100-mile winds for about 10 days right at the beginning. We couldn't do anything, and we'd go off. We'd have really kind of tough days. We'd go for 8 hours non-stop because every time we put our kites down, the kite would get into a huge tangle. Unlike kite surfing, where you have a blow-up wing, you blow up your wing, so it's a fixed structure. On snow kiting, it's a cell and it's soft, so it has about 40 different lines on it. And as you drop the kite, it goes inside, so it can create all a Chinese puzzle. And normally, when you're manhauling anywhere in Antarctica or in the Arctic, you sort of go for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you stop for 5 minutes. You have a quick hot drink out of a flask. You eat nuts and chocolate, and then you press on again, but only for 5 minutes, so you don't lose your core temperature. We tried to do it after every 2 hours when we started with the kites. And then we'd spend 2-3 hours trying to sort the kites out again. And we'd have to take our big mitts off so our hands got caught. So we fast realized the best thing to do was just go and just stay going. So we would go from anything from 7 to 9 hours non-stop. So if I said to you, right, Dan, I'm going to take, do you want to have a water ski? And you go, yeah, I love it. And then I pulled you for 9 hours. That's kind of what we did.
But,
anyway,
I mean, you must have been, absolutely exhausted. Because I can't. Did you suffer from a lot of sleep deprivation? What was the mindset that you had every morning to get up and just do that again and again for so many days? Was it like, if I don't do this, it's game over, or was it, this is so much, I'd rather be moving than sit? What was going through your mind every morning to kind of get you up? So this is the make it happen mindset to me.
Yeah. Look, I think there's two things. I've done teams for most of my life. I've done it on boats at a very, representing Britain, all the way down to the military, which is absolutely brilliant at this. And when I was looking at how we should attempt this, I was thinking, should it be a team of 4, which has merits to it, obviously, because if you're 4, you can split loads, so you're not carrying so much weight. If one person isn't firing on V12, then the other 3 can carry something. It's there's lots of, but everything takes a bit longer, and 3 like 4 is very good. And then I just thought, 2. I'd done 2 before. I'd done one of the first endurance races to the magnetic North Pole, a 450-mile race back in 2005. And as a sort of byline, but it's important. Endurance races, as you well know, they're kind of, mad people come up with an idea which is physically very demanding, and you deprive people of sleep and food, and you kind of watch the chaos that goes on. And then some bright spark said, well, let's do it in the high Arctic, on sea ice, which is very precarious at the best of times and dangerous, where there are also, the best time to do it is early summer, which is when all the polar bears come out of hibernation and they're very hungry. So I did this, and when we were thinking of, should we be a team? You could be a team of 4, 3, or 2. I ended up being a team of 2 with an amazing Italian girl called Cristina Franco. And when we arrived, it started in a place called Resolute Bay in Alaska, and I could see all the other teams looking at us going, oh man, we're going to chew you up. And, there was a Springboks team. I mean, it was all alpha males, big, strong
Yeah.
men. And, anyway, the long and short is we won. And we won the race, and we won it very much because of Christina. What she brought to our team meant that not necessarily the physicality aspect, but it was a race, and it was quite a long race. It took took a handful of days, and so I sort of, teams are very interesting. And so when I was looking at the chasing the light one, the crossing Antarctica, I ended up with two, and when I was looking at who it should be, I thought I need someone younger because obviously I'm starting to creak a bit. And I'd met Jamie. He's a doctor. He's in the military as well, and he's just amazingly. He's a very, very able chap. He's already done a crossing of Antarctica from Weddell to the Ross Sea. He'd rowed the Indian Ocean. So he had the mettle, but he's a very soft man. When you do things well, you want people who are empathetic, who are thoughtful. And those combinations in this kind of alpha environment are quite rare, because what you need to also be is very driven and quite hard. So it's unusual. And I have never, Jamie and I were away for 3 months. We were actually on the ice for 6 days all in. And, it was, you're right, we were the furthest two people from anyone in the world, the furthest distance from anywhere, the furthest from, and so we just had each other really. And you are tired, you get slowly run down. I mean, your body can only take so much. And we never had a crossword, not one.
Wow.
Which is remarkable. And again, you have to look at all these things. And coming back to your question about the mornings, basically, because of how we have been trained, what you must never do is kind of worry about the concern, because they're vast. So I mean, we wouldn't do anything. So you start every day, and it's a routine. Obviously, you've got to dismantle your home, and cook breakfast, dismantle everything. You're waking up in a tent, which is inside the tent is probably minus 35. And we couldn't burn fuel to heat our tent because everything was very, very carefully thought through that we'd be all right to hit the finish line. And in fact, when we finished, we'd been on half rations for 17 days, and we'd finished with no food. The last day we had nothing. The night before we'd had our last rations, and we had half a litre of fuel left. So that's how fine we cut it.
Wow.
And so you'd start, and we just sort of look at each other, and our eyes would say to each other, just be safe, let's go. But we had miles to do. We had to do, I think with all the tacking and stuff we did nearly 2,700 Ks. And so you just got to get on with it, and you mustn't mope about. And the other thing to really stress, actually, because it's important, that as with all of these things in life, there is an ingredient which is the best purer aphrodisiac of ebullient mindset, and that is to have a sense of humor. To somehow, I mean, I've been in so many really quite frightening situations, and someone has said something which is just comical, and suddenly it all diffuses the gremlins which can come around Jesus Christ, hold on, and you can quite easily slip into not being clear of mind. And so we're both those kind of people. We're quite, funny and twinkly. And so, and also I suppose we kind of always knew that this was an amazing trip. It was a trip of a lifetime, and we were extremely privileged and lucky to be doing it. And so, you hark back to all these things, but equally, big undertaking, you miss all the people you love, you miss all the things you like from, basic stuff, cold beer, hot bath, lovely food, all of that stuff. But you've got to slightly keep it all at bay. Otherwise, but yeah, I mean, amazing. But again, to reiterate, preparation, learning, it's going to be hard and how you're going to deal with those things. Yeah, so that's where we started from.
But the dogs are chiming in. You can hear.
Excellent.
What I wanted to ask you. So obviously you completed this. What was the reaction to, what was your personal reaction to complete? I mean, was it relief? Was it, what was going through your head as you crossed that line and you knew you were going to be heading back for your hot bath and your cold beer?
Well, I mean, it was a proper adventure, this, old school. I sort of knew it was the last one, me, as a sort of 60-year-old chap. You have to be quite physical on these things. And you also have to be careful because the ability is there, but youth brings with it one amazing thing, which is that kind of robustness, that rubbery, you can be knocked down and you just sort of bounce back. I was starting to find that if I got knocked down, I felt it. And so you have to you have to realize your limitations. And we go through life in phases. I've done so much of this and I've been extremely lucky. So it was my last sort of swan song, really, about the really, these sort of, a proper old school adventure. And so when we got to the end, and it was touch and go for a little bit, and we were sort of running out of everything, basically, and we thought we actually had to stop. We'd done about 70 miles the penultimate day, and we had 35 miles still to do, and we thought we just bashed through, just finished it. The weather wasn't good at all, and we had to stop. So we stopped with 35 miles to go. And the next morning we got up and it was blowing an absolute hoolie. It was a proper whiteout. And we got to the Amundsen Scott base, which is an American base at the South Pole. And there was a sort of mesh netting sort of hut, like a Nissen hut, but prefabricated. And it really was blowing a lot of wind, and we had our 6-meter kites up. There was very little viz, and we skied right up to the top of this mess of the, where a few people were having something to eat. And suddenly the door opened, and one of these guys came out, and they was, fully covered in his armor and goggles, and there, Jamie and I were literally on the step there. I mean, we were completely bedraggled. We'd lost a lot of weight. Our kit was completely torn, covered in gaffer tape. And we had these kites fluttering above us, and they were like, Jesus Christ, how did you get it? And he went, Justin? And I went, yes, because they knew we were coming, obviously, at some stage. And then literally 25 minutes later, we were both sat in the warm with all our kit off, with about 4 steaks and about 16 eggs in front of us and broccoli and, all the stuff and you can't really believe it. You sort of, it's funny, you hold on so tight. Yeah, so I think a bit of everything, lots of relief, a lot of, I suppose, satisfaction around, we'd done something which was very hardcore and kind of unusual. I mean, literally a handful of people, and yeah, it was incredibly satisfying. But the relief thing around us being safe, I think, was, very bad.
Were very relaxed.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
yeah, very much.
I mean, clearly you've done some amazing things, and I really appreciate you sharing, your story with us. And I'm sure there's lots more that you could probably write books and books and books about all the other adventures that you've gone on. But from all of that experience, what would you say are the kind of key takeaways that other people can benefit from?
Yeah, again, great question. I always think I do lots of talks at schools, and I think being curious and brave, Daniel, is a really important thing. We live in quite a conformist sort of world where you feel there's a path that you have to get on, and listen, that's very reasonable and understanding. But what fuels your inner self. I did a TED talk about what's inside you and what you actually kind of implement, make the invisible visible, it was called. And it's important that it goes so fast, life, that you really fuel stuff. And I think there are sort of four important sort of building blocks to really achieving that. And the first one is belief, really. You follow your dreams, and humans are meant to excel. We are a phenomenally cool piece of mechanics, and you are going to fail. As Winston Churchill said, success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. It really is very true. The second is what motivates you. And all these things. When I tell my story, I can't really believe that I've been able to do all these things, but I've just it's decisions you make will shape your destiny. And it's really important that you ask the big questions around, as I said, what's inside you, make the invisible visible. And it's, I think a lot of times people get lost on that, they don't sort of find it. The third thing I've always learned, and expeditioning is such a good thing for this, because there's no hiding. You cannot hide. And it's really about striving for excellence. It is trying to make yourself the very, very best version of yourself. And we're adaptive, we can learn, you can do all these things. And none of it will happen unless you work hard. Discipline plus effort equals I feel amazing at any level. It's getting up in the morning, going for a run or whatever. And as Steve Jobs, the Apple guy, said, be a yardstick of quality. And it's a good saying. And then finally, I think for me is that thing I've just said, is have fun, around whatever it is you're doing. Enjoy it. Look after yourself. Well-being is such very much your bread and butter. But it's imperative, your well-being, positive mindset, exercise, the food you eat, sleep, keep stress at bay. All of those things will galvanize you to being, firing on V12, really, which is great. And, enjoy it all. And we touched on it again around, get involved, put stuff back. Again, it's terribly good for you. And we need to, climate change, as I said, I've really seen it, and it's a very, very, very significantly major problem. And it's pointless pointing the finger at the perpetrators, because most of those perpetrators now are part of the solution. They're putting billions into trying to sort stuff out. And the truth is, when anyone says, well, what can we do? The truth is we can do masses. And if we get everyone, you get a revolution about every single person, every household, doing a tiny amount of stuff, recycle, buy food cleverly, turn your lights off, it'll make a difference. It'll make a vast difference. And so, you only have one life, basically. I think I'd finish with, learn, grow, push, experience, love, you make it all happen. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal journey. My kids, I just, I always say to them, you're so lucky. You're living in this, technological superhighway. Run that with going and doing stuff, and it's amazing. I mean, I have a fantastic, or I'm a partner in a fantastic travel business called Juro, and we can work from anywhere. With your phone now. I mean, it's just incredible. How adaptive we are, and so yeah, I think it's all very exciting, and I think. Just get involved in it, really. Just get involved, whatever it is, literally whatever it is, whether it's you want to learn to play the piano or the guitar, or you want to, I don't know, do a triathlon, whatever, do it. Literally just, get on with it.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
So, look, Justin, it's been an absolute pleasure. I would love to hear, have you got anything in the pipeline that we should be watching out for, or any other crazy adventures, or?
Yeah, I've been flying and looking at trying to kite surf across the Atlantic, which is a project I'm looking at with a chum of mine called Charlie Pitcher. So yes, that. But I just through work now, I we do lots of fun things at the four corners of the world. So I'm always sort of involved in that. I want to get a bit more involved in climate change and sustainability. Doro was one of the first B Corp travel companies, and so we're really trying to pin our colours to the masthead on that. So yes, there's always something quite fun.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we can get you on again, and listen,
Brilliant.
have a wonderful rest of your week, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks. Stay well. Ciao, ciao.